Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our latest Music Census Session, a partnership of the New Orleans Office of Nighttime Economy, the Ella Project, New Orleans Public Library, New Orleans Recreation Department, with some additional funding provided by the National Endowment for the Arts, which we always appreciate. And this is a program that's going to be continuing throughout the year. We're going to be doing them in blocks of four. So we'll do three. We'll then do networking sessions, get togethers. We'll do another three. The idea is to get some feedback along the way while we have some basic ideas of what sessions we want to perform. We do want to let time build up, continue to chat with you guys, hear what is most interesting to you. Just had our social media workshop last week and had a conversation with one of the attendees afterwards about doing a real deep dive into sponsorship for one of the ones. That wasn't one of the ones we had scheduled. Now we're going to have it scheduled. So that's the way this process is going to work. This is something that we're excited about. As I said, a lot of them we'll try and put on Zoom whenever possible, but we also want to get out into the community, get to the different and varied neighborhoods of New Orleans, and get the chance to chat with you guys in person. There's a lot of people that we know from our longtime work at the Ella Project, but there's a lot of new faces that we see in the Zoom boxes today, so that's great. Before I bring in my co-presenter, I want to say again, if you have questions, just use the chat box in the bottom of the screen. Go ahead and type in questions and do our best to answer them. If it's something that's we're going to answer in the next slide, we may say, that's right up. So otherwise, it should be a good conversation. We're looking forward to it. This is funding and grants for your music project. And I'm very happy to be joined by my partner in many different aspects: festival production, general support of the New Orleans cultural economy, Kia Robinson Hatfield, who's with us. Kia, you want to come and say a few words of hello to the people?
Yeah, hey everyone. Thank you for joining today in this conversation. Really interested in your questions, but and just having a dialogue with you guys. My name, like Jean said, is Kia Robinson Hatfield. I'm the Director of Programs, Marketing, and Communications with the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation. We are the nonprofit organization that owns Jazz Fest. And our role is to take the funds generated at the festival and invest them back into Louisiana communities, specifically Louisiana. A lot of people think we're just serving New Orleans area, but we are in fact a statewide organization. And so one of the many programs that we do is the Community Partnership Grant Program, and we distribute hundreds of grants across the state, millions of dollars to date. So I guess that's what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. It's going to be a good one. So I've got a little presentation put together. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up right now. And it's just basically going to guide us through where we are and where we're going to be. So as we said, funding and grants for music projects, and move around the boxes in your screen if you need to see anything a little bit better. And we'll go ahead and get this rolling. All right. So I think whenever we're talking about funding, and we're going to focus a lot on grants for this one. As I said, there's a little bit of a touch on sponsorship, but Kia runs a major funding program for Louisiana musicians. I think our perspective at Ella Project, twofold. One is a professional development organization. We work with a lot of clients to create their own nonprofits. We do a lot of planning with them into the activities that they're going to go into and what seems feasible, and also with individual artists. But the other side of things is that we are an applicant ourselves. Our pro bono services exist because we can find people that share similar goals to us and convince them to support us. We are not funded by user fees. We are not funded by a lot of contracts and sponsorships. We have to get our own funding. So we write a lot of grants ourselves. And I think hopefully we can take some of the experience that we have from that side of the equation, from the side of the applicant, and make this an interesting conversation today. So I think it's important to figure out, why people do this in the first place, because with that, I think we can better understand why this is an option. It's not just to give people money. That would be pretty easy. And while there are some tax concerns, they're not necessarily the primary ones. And so, Kia, I'd love to bring you in. Like, what are the goals of the funding program for Jazz and Heritage Foundation? You guys could do a lot with the funds you have. Why is the grants funding program important to you?
Yeah, I mean, basically it is to support Louisiana artists and the culture makers. What makes Jazz Fest so incredible and all of the community festivals that we produce and programs and concerts are the musicians, the artists, the creatives that we're able to showcase at these events. So it's incredibly crucial that we make sure we invest back into them, and grants is one way that we can do it. Well, it's one way we can do it.
Excellent. So I want to bring up just a few things that I thought up of it here. And so one of that's right there, right? It's improving public welfare. There's certainly a goal that we want to say, we'd like to all live in a better world. And if we are resourced, either as an individual or a family or a foundation, we can use the funds we have to try and improve public welfare. But how do we do that, right? One of the things is that we don't necessarily want to do all this ourselves. The same way that I may hire a licensed plumber to fix my pipes. I could learn to fix the pipes theoretically, but it's a lot easier if I have some funds to hire somebody. And so with grants, it's less about largesse and it's less about, oh, I'm giving this to you, because I want to bestow some of my wealth upon you. And it's more that I want to hire you to fix a problem. As a foundation, as a funder, I would like to have more of this. I would like to have better arts education resources in schools. I would like to have better music after school programs. Now, I could start my own, and a lot of people do. But in a lot of ways, what I can do is have a competitive process where I hire people and hiring people via a grant to actually provide those services. And so when you're looking at your own projects, I think that's an incredibly important philosophy and vision to have, is that what you're doing is you are a service provider and you are fixing a problem just like you are in any other sort of for-profit job that may exist out there. And then the other part too, though, promote the values and the brand of the funder. So there is always an opportunity for, whether it be a foundation, whether it be a corporation, whether it be the government, to let people know that we are doing these activities. And when they see our brand, whatever that brand may be, whether it's, a massive foundation or whether it's a toothpaste company, the public associates it with products and projects that they believe also contribute to social welfare. So there's certainly that aspect. And then the fourth is the tax benefits. And the reason that I put that last is because in a lot of ways, I think it's the least relevant of the reasons that people do this sort of thing. While it is true that any foundation who follows the correct rules that the IRS puts out there, and they distribute enough of their monies each year, and they operate in a transparent manner, and they print their tax returns online, which is something that we're going to get to, they do get the benefit of being able to have funds that are tax-free. There's honestly a lot of ways to minimize your tax bill. And a foundation is probably not the most efficient way to do it. So while there are benefits to that, I don't think it usually drives very much of the activity, especially once things get going for a while. And, if somebody has a pot of money in the very beginning and they want to say, you know what, I'd like to find a way to do some tax planning, sure, that may drive the opening up of a foundation. But over time, I think the benefit and the interest from their aspect becomes less and less real. The top three, in my opinion, are much more relevant. Okay. And so that's why we always say this, a grant is a contract. A grant is something where we have said, we would like you to do this, and we are going to contract with you to do that. And therefore, you guys have agreements. And Kia, talk about that from your perspective. What's the importance of getting that information in there, what you guys do to make it happen, and what artists need to know just going into the general process there.
Yeah, just to add on to your last point, another important thing, at least for the foundation, is to broaden um, the appreciation for the arts across the state, public awareness, better arts education so that we can revive arts in the schools, and just, fostering appreciation amongst cultures. Louisiana is so rich with many different cultures here. And so, building on the education of that is really important as well. But yes, grant agreements are a thing, and they are in place to, you know, line up everything that the organization or the foundation, promise to do for you, and vice versa, what we need on our end, as far as making sure that the project or program that has been proposed and has been funded happens. And then for you to make sure that you get, of course, your funds, and then any type of support, whether it be advertising or promotion, or fiscal agents, that type of support. So those agreements just line everything out. It's in black and white, and there's no gray area of expectations between both parties. So from our end, we ask for, I think our grant agreements are, and mind you, I'm on my end, I think they're pretty straightforward. You agree to do this event or do this project on this date, and then we agree to give you X amount of dollars to carry out this program. If you delineate from that plan, you agree to let us know in writing so that we can discuss if there's any issues that may come up. We allow you to use our logo to promote your event, and us as a funder of your event, a supporter of your event. And on our end, we will help promote your event. You promote us. It's a quid pro quo kind of situation.
Excellent. And yeah, this is just the reason we have them in there, to say, there are agreements on both sides of things. And, Ella Project at its heart is a legal organization. We do a lot of contract work, and we always feel that these ways of thinking about it, I think, helps clarify people's visions when they're going out and seeking funding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen some grant agreements where they are, they are very detailed in the fact that it's, you promise everything but your firstborn. We try to keep the barriers low. Do the project. We give the money up front. We don't wait until after your project or midway through. We give money up front. So try to keep the barriers low as far as we go.
And so let's dive into your program and what you fund, because this is, I think, where we start out. The first step is to figure out, who wants to buy what you're selling. Not every foundation is right for everybody. However, we are very lucky in this community that the Jazz and Heritage Foundation exists, because they do so much good work in many aspects, but especially in the funding aspect. And it is so wrapped into Louisiana music and culture, which of course is the target audience for a lot of these workshops. So Kia, give us an idea. Like, we talked a little bit about the overall philosophies, but some of the specific programs that you have, and what artists on this call should be most knowledgeable about and interested in.
Sure. So we have, in our community partnership grant program, and I wanted to say we have multiple programs for funding, but the most popular one is the community partnership grants. In that program, we have 5 categories of funding. And one category is for individuals, and that is for Louisiana individuals who are creating art. And so that may mean a musician creating an album. It may be a writer writing a new book, someone quoting a new piece for an exhibit. It's whatever your cultural expression is as it relates to Louisiana culture. Again, our grants are tied into our mission, and our mission is to preserve, perpetuate, and promote Louisiana culture. So, as Jean said, not everything is going to be for everybody. Our grants and our funding is very much so tied to promoting Louisiana culture and Louisiana artists, creatives. So if an individual is coming to us to write a book about Nebraska and how great Nebraska is, it's, that's awesome, but how does that tie into what we are trying to promote and support here? That is one category for individuals. The other categories that we have are presenting. So that's for nonprofit organizations who are producing festivals, concerts, concert series, any type of public event. Next, we have the media documentation and creation category, again, for nonprofits who are creating a documentation. So documentaries, it could be music productions, podcasts, anything that is preserving and documenting Louisiana culture. And then we have two education categories. One is in school, and that's for K through 12 schools. We support the arts, music, theater, culinary, whatever is happening in the schools. And then the other category, the last category in this program is education after school. And that is for nonprofit organizations who are supporting after school education programs or summer camps. And I would say the education categories are our largest categories across the state. And I'm very thankful for that, very happy that we are able to fund a lot in the education areas. Outside of the Community Partnership Grants program, we also have a discretionary grant that is to support musicians or culture bearer individuals who have passed away. We help with their last expenses, so burial expenses. And then we do have an impact grant that is a larger grant, and that is open to nonprofit organizations, again, who are creating meaningful, impactful work that require a large funding support.
And Kia, just there was a follow-up question. What was the name of the individuals category again? Somebody missed that.
So no problem. The individuals category is called the Louisiana Cultural Equity Arts category. It's a mouthful, but Louisiana Cultural Equity Arts, it's our only category for individuals. And I will say that in our grants we receive hundreds of applications, and I'm happy to say that we have a 92% acceptance rate. So I always encourage people to call me or email me, if they want to get, more specific one-on-one, have a conversation about what this work, because we have a review committee, we go through all the steps. And sometimes applications, when they come to us, the description may not be expressing what you're trying to express. So I love to talk to community. I love to talk to individual artists and help them craft it in the best way possible so that it's so that people who are reviewing will understand it.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great service and also so important for people to take you up on, not to give you more work, but I know that it's important to you guys as well, because that's been my experience working with program officers from different foundations. I mean, they want good applications. The last thing they want to do is put an application up to their review committee that ultimately isn't competitive. And so I encourage people to take advantage of that opportunity. And not everyone can do it either, and not everyone will, but usually that's pretty well communicated on their website. And but for the most part, I think everyone is usually quite happy and encouraged to help you make the best application possible. And that, I think, really comes back to what a lot of the ideas that we see on the slide are, which is figuring out what makes the most sense for you. Finding out what resources are out there, sign up with your local arts council. They all have different email services of opportunities. There's national calls as well that come out from organizations like Artists Thrive, like Creative Capital. Of course, Jazz and Heritage has their own emails that come out. We don't really do a bunch of opportunity bulletins, but we do throw some stuff up on our social media when it becomes possible. The other important thing is to go ahead and do as much research as possible ahead of time. And the nice thing is that foundations tax returns are public record. They're online. Either they're published by the foundation itself. Most nonprofits put their link to their nonprofit tax return, their 990 in the parlance, online. But if not, they're really easy to find. You can either find them directly through the IRS. There's an organization called Candid, used to be known as GuideStar, for those of y'all been around for a while. They have a ton of information on different foundations, including, their 990s. The things that you can find out here are basically who they funded over the years. And that can allow you to say, all right, you know what, like I see in the description of this foundation that they support activities in Louisiana, but as I look deeper into it, I see that like 98% of those are in Northwest Louisiana, and I'm in New Orleans. And it doesn't mean that it's not something that could work for you, but it is information that you want to have going into it, Or conversely, I see that they fund education, but then I look at it and it's mainly, parochial school donations that they make. Well, I don't have a parochial school, so that may be something where I think, well, maybe this isn't such a good fit. And it can also usually give you amounts, which is always a nice thing to see, because while there may be categories that say, we accept grants up to this number, sometimes that is completely true. And other times, that can be misleading. They could say, we'll fund up to XYZ amount of money, but then you look at the 990 and you see, well, they never do. They only get to half of that rate. And that's fine, but that allows you then to do proper budgeting to have a better understanding of what's possible. So the information is public, it's all out there. It takes a little bit of experience to learn how to read the 990s properly, but it's not that hard. And the little hack is that normally the information on who these foundations fund all goes in an attachment at the end. So even if you pull up the tax return and it's like 200 pages, scroll to the last page. It'll probably be where they have an attachment that lists all the information. And it also gives you an idea, of how much money they actually have. It'll tell you this is how much we're sitting on. This is how much we put into the ecosystem last year. It's all really helpful information, and it all really helps you as you begin to make your plan. All right, so this is what we were talking about here. Am I even eligible? So pay attention to geography. Kia mentioned, they fund Louisiana. There could be a great project about Nebraska. Jazz and Heritage Festival and Foundation is not really the source for that. Especially when you're looking through national lists, get an understanding of, are you eligible? There's so many foundations that really want to impact, their neighborhood, their community, their city, their state. And you could have the greatest project in the world, but it's not something that they're necessarily going to be interested in. And then Kia referenced, some of these grants they can apply as an individual, some you can apply as a fiscal agent. And so let's go into the fiscal agent category. Kia, how do you guys work with fiscal agents, and what are some of the things that you can tell the people about, if this is a new term to them and they say, I don't know what that is, what would you tell them?
I would tell them a fiscal agent is someone who is going to take over the fiscal part, the tax part of your grant. They will be responsible for paying the taxes. For our particular organization, we do not provide fiscal agents, as in we will not be the fiscal agent for someone to do a grant. We will connect you with other arts organizations in the city or state who can provide that for you. But we don't provide the service. But we will work with fiscal agents. A lot of artists will do that. Will use a fiscal agent if they've, for various reasons, if they just want someone to handle the money part, the money side of it, and they don't want to deal with it, that's fine. Or if they, if they want to, they've got their project is so massive and they really need to focus on the art itself. So, we've seen different reasons, but we will work with everybody and even try to connect you with someone who can work with you if you need a fiscal agent.
Yeah, and this is a really important concept, especially for artists who are relatively new to the grants game, is that the way that the laws are set up, foundations have to give a certain amount of their money every year to existing 501c3 organizations. And you say, well, I'm not a 501c3 organization. And in all likelihood, you don't want to start one, especially not to just do one project. This is basically the way that you can come eligible for the grant, and it still allows the foundations to make sure that their requirements are taken care of. And it also provides a little bit of structure if things do end up going sideways. So the basic idea is that an existing 501c3 will apply as your fiscal agent. And I always look at it like someone who's co-signing for your loan. I don't know if you bought a car when you were 19 and they were like, yeah, we need your parents to co-sign for this. We're not giving you the money outright, even though you'd be the one paying the note. It's a similar concept. If things go a little bit off the rails, there's an entity instead of an individual that the foundation can say, hey, we gave you this amount of money and nothing happened, so we would like it back. This doesn't happen very often, but it is something that does come up, and it is an opportunity to allow everyone to remain in compliance. But the beauty for artists is it means that you don't have to set up your own nonprofit organization. We do create nonprofits at Ella Project, and half jokingly, but only half, I often say that one of my jobs when people call up is to do my best to talk them out of setting up their own nonprofit, because there are so many out there, and they're in many ways quite under-resourced, and the upkeep, while not awful, is legitimate. And the last thing that people need to do is to start organizations to try and get a little bit of money, a couple $1,000s, which then, half of it ends up getting eaten up with different fees for accountants, attorneys, et cetera, et cetera. And you have a structure of an organization that you may not need after, you do the project. So it's really a great tool that I encourage everyone to take advantage of where possible. Now, as Kia said, they will help you with people that can provide those services, but you can find your own as well. The key from the nonprofit side of things is that the organization doesn't really get much out of it. It really is something where they're usually doing it as a favor to you. There may be a small amount of administration fees that they take, and I'd also caution everyone to pay attention to that and make sure that those fees are minimal, because they should be minimal, because while there is a little bit of risk that the nonprofit assumes and a little bit of financial work, it's not that great. And we have seen, not necessarily here as much, fortunately, but we have seen people that it's like, oh, well, I have a 20% fiscal agent fee, and that, in my opinion, is just unacceptable, because it's not 20% amount of the work that's going on. So pay attention to those fees. They should be relatively minor, 3 to 5%, I would say, but I'm not saying that it has to be that, but that's what I would. Anything over that, I'd really want to ask questions like, well, why are you doing this for more than that? Are there other services that you're offering that I'm not aware of?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of talked about this already, understanding the difference between eligibility and competitiveness. There's plenty of information that you'll find out there that says this may be a program that you can apply to. But by doing enough research, getting an idea who they funded in the past, where possible, talking to the program officers, and getting a better understanding of what they're really diving into the mission of the foundation, of the organization, get an understanding, is this going to be competitive or not? Because, there's opportunity cost to putting in these applications. It's time that you're taking away from running other programs. It's time that you could be, doing something as simple as marketing, but it's also time that you could be taken away from actually, doing the work that you're looking to get funding for in the first place. So, I think that it's important to remember, just because they say that it's something that they support, do enough research to fully make sure that that's in fact the case, and that it's something where if you put in an application, you're going to have, a reasonable chance of success. The programs are competitive. One of the I I sit on the board of the Louisiana State Arts Council, and we do project grants that run throughout all parts of the state. And unfortunately, the funding for those grants does not come close to meeting the supply of quality projects out there. And every year, multiple projects that are high quality don't get funded. And that's unfortunate.
Mm.
So, long story short, the reason that I'm bringing that up is to know that these things are competitive. And if you've done your correct research and you've looked into it and you're not funded, don't necessarily be surprised, because there is a lot of competition that comes into it. But by looking at places like Jazz and Heritage that have a higher rate of success, and really honing in on what you're doing and making sure it aligns with those missions, you'll be able to increase your chances of funding and being able to pull off the projects at the levels that you need to make it a reality.
Yeah, can I add to Jean, when it uh when speaking of the Jazz and Heritage Grants, because we have 5 different categories, familiarize yourself with the categories, or any organization that is structured in that way with their funding. Familiarize yourself with the guidelines, what the goal is for that particular category. There's so many times when I see a grant applicant in the wrong category, and it's a good project, but you're sitting in front of hundreds of applications. And yes, it is time consuming to reach out to the applicant to tell them that they've applied in the wrong category. I mean, it's a nightmare on the administrative side, trying to put people where they're supposed to go to. And then the result of that is that it may be deemed ineligible, or delayed as far as a response goes. So, familiarizing yourself with the categories, making sure that your project aligns with what the grantor is asking for, is looking for in that particular category, would be a benefit to us both.
Yeah, 100%. Again, the more we do on the front end by really diving into the guidelines, all this stuff will be addressed. For organizations that take their funding program seriously, I guarantee 99 times out of 100, your question is going to be addressed somewhere in the guidelines. So, I know that sometimes it's a lot of reading, but the more you can familiarize yourself with it, the better you can put yourself in a position to succeed, not just as far as categories, but, we talked a lot about fiscal agent. Fiscal agent works for a lot of grant proposals. It doesn't work for everything. Like, for instance, going back to the funding that comes out of the Office of Cultural Development in the state of Louisiana, we will fund project grants with fiscal agent, but we won't fund operating support with fiscal agent. The National Endowment for the Arts doesn't fund through fiscal agent, but they may fund an individual for a very small number of very competitive programs. All that stuff is going to be in the guidelines. And the more that you've prepared yourself ahead of time, obviously the better position you'll be in. Yeah. We've talked a lot about funding, but there are a couple of other things I think to be aware of, that it's not always about money. One of the aspects is that artist residencies can be a great opportunity to get in a community of like-minded artists from all different parts of the country or all different parts of the world, to have an opportunity to spend some time working on your work. And they're often in very lovely environments. The photo that we have up there is our own studio in the woods in Lower Coast of Algiers, which is, a jewel for Louisiana to have, where we have this beautiful residency space that invites not just Louisiana artists, but artists, from all over the world to come 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever, usually your room and board are taken care of, or they're taken care of at a very favorable rate. And it really gives you a chance to work on your art and figure out what's going on. There's a good, and I'm going to send out a resource list at the end of this. We had a beautiful, well, maybe it wasn't beautiful, but we had a very informative document that we had printed up that if we were going to be at the library today, we'd hand out. Well, we're going to email it to you instead. But one of the resources that I think a good one to always look into with this is Alliance for Artist Communities, and I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. And they are really a great resource to know all the residency communities around the country, and also have a good email list but there are a lot of them, so if it's something that you're into, by all means take a look at that, take a look at the other resources that are out there. And and I know it's a mantra, but read the fine print very carefully. There's artist residency communities that are set up to really support the artist and do public good and give them a space to work and create and put them in touch with other creatives from around the world. And they're ones that are looking to make a little bit of money. And figuring out which one is the one you're applying to is really relevant, because it's great to apply to something and then find out well, there's $4,000 monthly fee to it, but you could probably just go rent a house for $4,000 somewhere. So make sure that you've done the research and really figured out which ones are really offering great benefits, which ones seem to be, patronized by other artists in not just your community, but in your genre and type of work that you're doing around the country, and find the ones that may fit you best. It's definitely something that, while it may not result in direct cash in your pocket, it can have a great opportunity to grow your project in an interesting environment, and usually in an economically advantageous situation. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about sponsorships, because, as I said, we are going to do a deep dive into this later on in Music Census Sessions. But I think that with sponsorships, we really need to change our perspective to figure out, again, who wants to buy what we're selling. But in this case, what we're selling is different, because when we're looking at sponsorships, we're rarely looking at people that are looking to say, well, I'd like to outsource social change. I'd like to use this to build public welfare. What they're looking to do in this case is probably either grow their brand, or, have an opportunity to connect to your audience. So one of the things that I think is a great advantage, artists are cool, for lack of a better word. People like to hang out with artists, and people like to get their products in front of fans of, different groups of artists. And this is especially true for musicians, because music fans in many ways are very dedicated, right? These are the people that are going to show up to all your different shows. These are the people that are going to buy your merchandise. These are the people that are going to follow all your social networks. These are people, as a for-profit business, that I may like to get to know. And right now, I think there's a great opportunity, because as we have seen, it's really, really challenging to market things these days. 20 years ago, we had a daily newspaper. We had usually an alt weekly, in our case, the Gambit. We would have specialty publications like Offbeat. We would have radio, we would have television, we would have direct mail. And all of those worked if we wanted to spend money to get the word out to consumers, right? All of those are in a much more challenging situation these days. And so you have companies, you have products, they're looking to market, but they are having the same issue of figuring out how that is best done. That I think a lot of us are. When we do our Crescendo program, one of the things we always talk about is like, how do you engage public and let people know that you're out there? And then the answer is, it's complicated. Well, the same thing is true if you're selling vacuum cleaners. The same thing is true if you're selling cigars. How do you get the word out when we've had this breakdown of traditional media. And one of the ways is by working with artists and people who, you know, we think that people will want to engage with the product because they like to engage with you, because they think that you're cool. Or if you're doing an event, that you bring the type of audience that they're looking to do. So similarly, when we were talking about, figuring out if you're a fit for the foundation, the same thing is true as to figure out, is your audience a fit for this? So this is where really knowing your numbers back and forth is really important. Knowing who you are reaching, getting the most demographic information you can as far as income, as far as other interests that they might have, as far as, where they're coming from, zip codes, etc. And adding all those up, don't leave any stone unturned here. We're talking people that come to a show. We're talking people that follow us on Instagram. We're talking anyone who buys merchandise, YouTube views, anything. All this information is relevant. And I think that at the same time, know your own values, because there is a continued need for authenticity. And this doesn't mean don't sell out in a 1960s style, but it does mean that, if your fan base is not necessarily going to react well to a certain product, then you have to take this seriously, to think, is it going to be worth what you're getting out of it? To, let's say, I'll give you an example that's outside the arts, because I think hopefully that removes any sort of prejudice behind it. So there's a soccer team that I follow, and earlier this year they entered into a sponsorship with a weapons manufacturer, and this caused a lot of their fans to be really, really outraged about it, and the amount of money that they got from taking, billboards from a weapons manufacturer really probably wasn't worth the amount of grief they got online, with people, holding signs of protests at the stadium, et cetera, et cetera. So, it is something that I think you have to think about and make sure that it aligns with you. Kia, I know that you, outside of your, and you do so much for the foundation, but one of the things that we do together is that we do some event production with some of the free festivals. I know that you have some sponsorship work that comes in there, and I'd just like to know from someone who's producing the festivals, what do sponsors like about what Jazz and Heritage Foundation does, and what are they getting into the agreement with you guys for?
Sure. Yeah. So our sponsors, they're looking for obviously people with buying power. They're looking for people who will come to the festivals to buy merchandise from the artists, food, alcohol, beverages, who love music, and who want to hang out, who will then also probably go and shop in the quarter or downtown or uptown or somewhere. That's what they're looking for, people with buying power. We're looking for people to watch local musicians jam out on the stages, and to engage with culture. So yeah, that's essentially what they're looking for. And they're putting their product in front of audiences. So it has to be mutually beneficial. We don't want to put harmful products in front of our audiences. And so, yes, and I'm being mindful of the position that Jazz and Heritage has as an organization, with where our main fundraiser is Jazz Fest. So we are in a position where we can say, no, thank you. This doesn't align with what we're trying to accomplish with this event, or, this is a family festival. So we are not going to put this product in front of potential children who will be out there. But at the end of the day, there are so many local companies, incredible companies doing really good work in the community, who want to sponsor events, who want to sponsor, who want to be in front of Louisiana communities and artists, and want to align themselves with that structure.
Yeah, and so I think again, figuring out what you have that they're going to be interested in. It is a transactional relationship in my experience with sponsorship.
Yes.
What numbers are you bringing to the table? Usually, when, for instance, for us, we do a lot of pro bono legal work, right? And so when we're doing development work with law firms, we may get donations from the firm itself. If we're ever in a conversation for events, though, we get transferred to their marketing team. And their marketing team is not necessarily looking to support pro bono because they believe in it. They're looking to say, what sort of individuals can a relationship with Ella Project bring who would be interested in the services that we're selling? And, in all honesty, as a pro bono program, we may not necessarily be the most positioned to provide that for them. But it becomes a very different conversation once you start talking to the marketing side of things. They are absolutely looking to figure out how they can engage people that would like their products. But again, I think right now, and I can confirm this, having talked to people that do a lot of marketing, they're trying to figure out what to do with dollars. They can get marketing budgets together, but because the media landscape is so complicated and so fractured, they're looking for new and creative ways. And you may have something that works with them, and it may be an opportunity where they can engage authentically with an audience that they are interested in that the traditional ways would not be able to bring them.
Yes, they are also well, the ones I've interacted with are very interested in younger audiences.
Yeah.
Um, people recognize that young people have a lot of power and influence. And so they're very interested in, not just us old fogies who will go to a festival and buy some art, but they wanna engage with young people.
All right. All right. Let's get back to the grant application side of things. Now, this is, as I said, we write a lot of applications. So from my perspective, writing your applications, these are the important things that we want to look into, right? And the most important thing is assume that they know nothing. You may be someone who is well known, you may think that you're very well known. You may in fact be well known. Assume they know nothing. There's another foundation, not Jazz Fest, that I did some grant review for a couple of years ago that funds a lot of local musicians. And the amount of musicians who I was familiar with but didn't tell me anything about themselves in this application process was remarkable. Because if I hadn't been familiar with them, they didn't tell me anything about themselves, really. Some of them probably assumed I knew who they were, and maybe they were right, but it made it really challenging to be able to review that application authentically when it's like, well, if I didn't happen to have this outside knowledge, I wouldn't have known that this person actually will be able to deliver this great project. So assume people know nothing. If it seems like you're explaining simple details, that's okay. That's totally fine. It's important to know that you have no idea who's going to be reading these things. And the best thing to do is to walk in and think, I need to tell them everything about myself, with the caveat, as we see in number 4, that most applications these days are online and they're set up with strict character counts. And the character counts are not an individual that you can appeal to or high power. It is a computer program, and you got to make sure that you can get everything that you want to say within that box. There are, of course, little tricks on how you write these things and writing out numbers versus using numerical things, using the ampersand, etc. But at the end of the day, we all have to be able to do all these things, give as much specific detail as possible. The more a reviewer can say, all right, I know that this is not just a idea. I know that this isn't just a dream, that this person has gone out and done the legwork, that they have identified the people that they want to work with. And it's okay if you don't have a contract with them yet, but at least you've had a conversation. I would like to be able to bring these bands together to do this project together. I've already done the research, and I know that this is what's the production costs for this documentary project that I'm doing are going to be. I've identified these are the target markets that I want to reach. And I know that these funds will give me the ability to market to this audience because I've gotten quotes. I've gone ahead and looked up online and figured out, all right, how much is it going to cost for me to get to this audience? And I can put in real data, I can put in real partners, and I can make it so that everyone understands that this is not just an idea, but this is something where I know I can get this taken care of. I just need this little bit of help, and so of course, again, the more support that you can already show is great, but at the same time, people want to know that it's not something that their health is totally ancillary for, and we can get to that a little bit when we get to the budget side of things. But this is what we're looking at. Assume they know nothing. Let's give as much detail. We're going to have as much planned out as possible. We're going to hit our character counts. Kia, things that you want to add to that?
Just in your project description to speak as plainly as possible. I love reading the description, but sometimes artists can get so caught up, the creative community can get so caught up in the vision, they may lose sight of just it's this event happening this because of this. The we love the descriptive language, but don't lose sight of just saying what it is that you're doing. Having to leaf through applications to trying to figure out if it's a play or concert series or festival, it can be a little taxing. So all of these 1 through 4, and say what it is that you're doing plainly, and then add the flowery language.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's look at the budget aspect of this. I think that it's something that oftentimes is overlooked. We spend so much time getting the words correctly. We make sure that we describe it the best that we can. We hit our character counts, but we want to make sure that our numbers make sense, right? Again, it shows that we've done due diligence and that we're ready to go. And also, it makes the funder understand that, their money is going to be well invested. So let's look at these things here. Be realistic with your expenses. I think this is especially relevant. I've read a lot of proposals over the years where, the fees for the artists that they're looking to hire are usually they're too low. Sometimes they're quite extreme, but usually they're too low. And I don't think that does you any favors. I mean, I've never met a foundation that funds artistic projects that doesn't want to make sure that artists' fees are being paid a fair wage. We know that in the arts, this is a constant struggle, and we know that outside the artistic community, a lot of times our labor is taken for granted, and foundations feel the same way. So make sure that your artist fees are, at the very least market value, and that that you're going to be able to pay the artist what's required. And also, that's just part of planning your project. How are we going to actually make this work? We all know that sometimes, especially live events, festivals, it can get a little bit chaotic at times. And if we've planned ahead of time financially, then we'll do well. In-kind donations. In-kind is anything that's not monetary, and that can be space. It can be use of rental equipment. It can be food and beverage to feed the volunteers. Don't neglect it, not just in looking for it, but make sure that it's listed in the budget as well. This is especially important for grants that require a match. And again, go back to the guidelines, but almost every grant that I've seen that requires a match will let you use some in-kind in that as well. And so if you're looking to get a full match, if then by match, we're saying that basically, if you're applying for $5,000, you have to have $5,000 by other sources. See if that's always $5,000 cash, or if it could be $5,000, it could be $3,000 cash and maybe $2,000 in kind. But again, make sure that that in kind number is realistic and that it makes sense. We have a very lovely deal with the New Orleans Jazz Museum where our offices are located. It is an in-kind donation that they give us office space. And when I put in grant proposals and when I do our budget, I list this as in-kind income. But I can't list the income for the one office that we rent at $20,000 a month. It's not how much that office would cost if they rented it out. So I did a little work and I found out, all right, how much square footage in this location, how much is this office worth? I got a number. And now I have an in-kind amount that I can list. And sometimes it can help make up matches, but it also just helps grow the budget. And it also explains to people why, if they look at our full expenses breakdown, they don't see a rent category on there. Because that's something that I think, especially with grant programs where the supply, where the demand exceeds the supply of money, as a reviewer, you get to a point where you got to start making tough decisions, right? And one of the ways that you can do that is through looking at the budget and saying, all right, because we've had 30 great proposals and they're 30 great ideas working with 30 great artists, but we can only fund 20 of them. We only have money for 20. We've got to cut 10. Well, from my side, when I've been a reviewer, this is often where I can try and make some of those tougher decisions. It's really diving into the budget and making sure that it's realistic, that it covers all the bases, and that they've done the planning and legwork to know that the project will be successful. And the third, of course, is pay yourself. And this is not always as obvious as it can be, because there's not always a category in there that says, pay Gene, but we need to make sure that we build everything into the proposal so that you are not purely working for free. That only can work for so long. I'm not saying if it's the first year out, everyone's got to do some interesting things, right? But after a while, unless everyone's independently wealthy, people need to be paid appropriately for their time. So make sure that you build in administrative costs, that it's understood that you as a project director, if that's the role that you're playing, are going to get paid for this. Kia, any thoughts that you may have there as well?
Oh, I just put in the chat. I'm agreeing with you. Make sure you pay yourself administrative expenses. Is how you can label it in your grant proposal. And yeah, make sure you pay yourself. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and again, the broader support, the better off, especially when it comes time to making those tough cuts. I mean, I think it's just human nature. If I see that 3 or 4 other foundations have already bought into this project, I'm much more likely to think, well, they're probably not all wrong, right? So if I can show, and this is where, a little tip if you're doing your budgeting, even if you're just pulling a little bit from each of those other supporters, because maybe they're not saying, 100% of these funds have to go to this one project. Maybe it's something where you have a little bit of discretion. If you bring in 3 or 4, what we look at is as pro rata, where they're paying a little bit of it, but it helps build up your match and it shows a broader line of support. I think that can only help your proposal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, collaborations are really good and show good in an application. It shows that other people are invested in your work. So don't be shy with sharing who your collaborators are.
Yeah, 100%. It goes without saying, people love to be able to say that this is a partnership that expands their own outreach. And again, it shows buy-in that other people believe in your work. And if other people believe in your work, maybe as a funder, I should as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is just a pure opinion, but I get it a lot, What about AI? And so my basic feelings on this are, if you're not someone who has written a lot of grant proposals, play around with some of the AI programs, see what they can do. Ask them questions on, tell me the importance of New Orleans brass band tradition. See what they come up with. I think it can probably help your proposal. My philosophy from the times where I have been on the review side is, of course we're influenced by impressive language, but that's not what we're really reviewing, right? This isn't an English class. We're not necessarily purely looking at how good the writing is. We're trying to figure out is this project a good one? And does this person have the capacity to pull that off? And if you're not experienced with writing and you find it intimidating, use the tools that are out there. You know, I see very little difference between that and saying someone who would say, oh, I won't use spell check because, I'm not going to let a machine do it for me. No, I use spell check. And I think that'll be fine. I think the understanding though is that use of programs that are AI based, they're going to get you to a level, but they're not necessarily going to get you to the peak. And because it's the nature of the programs, right? All these things are coming millions of sources that they've been fed, and they're coming up with, what was probably the equivalent of a B paper. Which if you're a D student, that's great, but it may not be the A paper. And so I think that they realize that there is probably a certain level that AI can get you to, and it's not going to be for everybody, but for those of y'all who do worry or find it intimidating, I think that it's something to pay attention to. So we do have a question here. It says, do you ever introduce potential collaborators to each other based on some of the projects or funding that come to you?
I do. And again, sitting where I'm sitting, I see all the projects coming in, and I see, oh, these people should meet. Either their work aligns with each other, or they could create something beautiful from it. So yeah, I'm always making connections. And to that point, it's the reason why we have had networking, a grant social, so that folks can come together in one room and network. And it's not me sending 100,000 emails all over the place. It can happen right there in one room. And we've seen some extremely beautiful collaborations come from those types of events.
And as that's obviously fantastic. I'll also say it's not something that everyone can do or will do. So again, we're lucky to have the Jazz and Heritage Foundation. They go above and beyond. And that's a great example of it, but I think that it's not something that's going to happen with every foundation or organization that you're working with. But do take advantage, I think, of those in-person events as much as possible. We've always seen, through years of doing programs like our Crescendo program. I think probably at the end of this program, some of the other like multi-series entrepreneur sessions that we've done is that artists who didn't know each other at the beginning of the session knew each other by the end of it, and all of a sudden they're doing something together, and it's super fun. But it does work best in person. I mean, I think that it's great, obviously, that we could do this forum today and get this information out on schedule. But we missed something by not being in person. So I think just a little soapbox moment for me is when you see these opportunities come up, even if it's something where you're like, you know what, I know about this application. There's nothing that I can learn there. And there's always probably something, but also getting an idea of who the people are that you meet before and after the workshop or the seminar or the social. It can be invaluable, and you can really come up with some cool things. And so, yeah, we'll be doing a social January 30th. You'll get an email about it. It's going to be at Anna's in the Meneray. So come out to that social. All right, moving right along. All right, we're getting close to the end here. This is all pretty straightforward information. Compliance and record keeping. One of the things that I found over the years, figuring out, what people are going to want to see for how you've spent their money. And this is where technology has changed, and sometimes not everyone has kept up with it. There's a certain group that I work with that just insists that we pay everyone by checks. Okay, but it's certainly less convenient than being able to pay them with Zelle, with Venmo, etc. And if I have an agreement with them ahead of time that says I'm going to provide this services on this date at for this fee, then the payment method from a presenter, from the not a grantor but a applicant, to me this seems less important, but that's not the way it is to everybody. And so figuring out what's going to be required, what you can spend money on, all that's going to be in your grant agreement. Some of it is, is straightforward and is not going to surprise you. You're not going to spend this necessarily on lobbying. There's usually, you're not going to spend this on alcohol, but there's other things that maybe something else that comes into play as well. There's some other project grants that I'm familiar with where building administrative costs for a project director is okay, but some other general organizational overhead is not. There's others where it is. Do as much research at a time to make sure that when the project is done and you put in a final report, that everything is easy. Because the last thing anyone wants to do once the project is done is have to go back to you and go, oh, guess what? Like this actually isn't allowable, and now you've already done the project. I always say, the logos, and Kia mentioned this earlier, where, you're going to see in the grant agreement that, well, you're required to use this logo. And I say, cheers to that. It's a lovely thing for me to be able to say, this is supported by the National Endowment for the Arts, a project supported by New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, supported by South Arts, et cetera, because for people that don't know us, it gives us a dramatic amount of credibility. So, I think sometimes people look at it and say, oh, they make me use this logo, but Kia phrased it as a partnership. And I think that's absolutely the best way to look at it, that, you get credibility from being someone who's funded by this foundation. And of course, they get the benefit of people being able to see the good work that their dollars and time and resources are putting into it as well. So, I say if you can put the logo on there, go ahead and do it. It's never a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. Kia, any thoughts on this?
Just make sure that you're in touch with the marketing department or grants department to make sure you're crediting the funding organization in the appropriate way. Sometimes they have requirements for how the logo is to appear on a black background versus a white background, sizes. You don't want to stretch anybody's logo out of, its dimensions. Sometimes they prefer you to name them as opposed to using their logo. So just even asking and showing the interest of wanting to share that funder supported your project is a nice, it's a nice gesture too.
Absolutely. Okay, guess what? I think we've covered what we wanted to cover. So Kia, before you open it up to questions, final thoughts, stuff that we didn't cover, stuff that you were like, oh yeah, well, Gene, we forgot this.
Oh, yes, one thing. So, just stating this might be obvious to everybody. It may not be, but when you are requesting funding, you're of course going to ask for the most, right? If the organization has a grant limit of 10,000, you're going to probably ask for 10,000. You may not get that whole 10,000. And I can speak only from my organization because this is what I do. But we are funding hundreds of people. And unfortunately, there's just with the money that we are allotted for this program, there's still not enough funding for everybody. But just know that there are those of us who are fighting on the back end to make sure that we increase those budgets every single year. We see the need in the community, but it is not a reflection on if your project is amazing or not. It is budget constraints because we have them as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go ahead and open it up to questions. If you guys have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. While the chat may be populating, I'm going to take the opportunity to give another little plug. We'll be back next week, Wednesday, 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. My partner, Ashley Keaton, will be discussing intellectual property, and we'll be at Nora Library in the Bywater, and hopefully on Zoom. And all that you can find to RSVP for at the NOLA Music Census site and at the Ella Project site. I'm going to put the NOLA Music Census link in the chat, nolamusiccensus.org/sessions. And these will all be free, and and hopefully something that you'll find interesting and engaging. And again, we are going to continue with this program throughout the year. We've already had good conversations with the project principals about keeping it going in 2026 as well. So if there are other topics and things that you guys want to discuss, make sure to let us know. We do have a question. Are the sessions continue to be recording for those of us working during the day? As much as possible. Yes, 100%. I like to be able to record them. That said, there are some times where the presenters don't want us to record them, and that's totally fine. We're never going to say, no, you must be recorded. Some people don't want the stuff out there floating around so they can be taken out of context. But I'm always for being able to capture this information. We do have a lot of our previous sessions available on our website as well. If you go to illinola.org, there's a section that's called On-Demand Workshops. And for the workshops over the last couple of years, and it really has been just the last couple of years since the technology allowed us to effectively and cheaply record these sessions, we've been able to put some of those things online. And that's going to continue to be available. Take a look at what we already may have up there. And says is a list of music funding arts projects. Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email everybody the document that we had put together that was a resource list that we're going to hand out to you. Other grants you points to for culture barriers or spiritual based projects. Some of that'll be on there. And then, these are always conversations to have as well. Certainly reach out to Kia about what the foundation does. And also reach out to us and we can just talk about general things. Question, are they accepted year round? There is a deadline. Kia, every year you guys have a grant deadline.
Yes, our grants generally open up in March, and the deadline is early summer, so June, end of June, like early July.
So it says the city of New Orleans has granting programs. So you're planning sessions with them. Sure, we always know them, and we know that their funding programs, they all work a little bit differently. And all that information will be on the resources list that we put together there.
Can I plug one thing?
Please.
So this is for anybody who's a nonprofit organization. We have a program called Community Outreach Tickets. I'm putting the link here in the chat. This is for Louisiana nonprofits who provide services for community. This program allows the organization to get Jazz Fest tickets to give to their community, to their beneficiaries. So applications are open now. It closes March 17th. The guidelines on that website. So please fill out an application if you have a nonprofit to get tickets for your community.
Excellent. And again, just another one of the amazingly cool things that you guys do to support us and to allow us to continue the work that we do. So thank you again for that and so many other things. I really so value having this foundation in our community and know what it does for the artists in Louisiana. And we are lucky to have y'all and lucky that y'all continue to do the work that you do. And we're lucky to have you guys joining us today. And I think Kia and I both really enjoyed it and look forward to chatting with y'all further. I think at this point we're going to sign off and, we'll have a few more hours of sunlight to see what happens with the snow next, but hope everybody stay safe, stay warm. Come to us for the next workshop on the 29th. Look at the community outreach tickets and we'll definitely get you email information about the other grants and when the Jazz and Heritage Foundation opens up their deadline. All right, everybody, y'all take care. See you on the other side.
Thank you.